I love the assault bike because it's easy on the joints. You can dictate how hard the workout's going to be. So these 3 conditioning methods are ones that I use for my own program as well as my clients. Keep in mind that these are all borrowed from Joel Jamieson. He's my go-to resource when it comes to conditioning methods. So when it comes to the first one's the most basic. It's kind of like the most foundational form of conditioning or your cardiovascular health. It's the cardiac output method. And the cardiac output method is basically your zone 2 cardio. For about 30 to 40 minutes, what you're gonna do is you just go on the assault bike and you're gonna basically pedal at a fairly gradual pace. You'll know you're going at the right intensity where you do what's called a talk test. So the talk test is when you can comfortably hold a conversation while you're doing it. So if you're going too hard during it and you're panting and you're out of breath while you're doing this method, you're not going to get the true value out of it. You want to go fairly light. So anywhere between 30 to 40 minutes is, usually recommended to get the most bang for your buck when it comes to the cardiac output. And remember, just use the talk test. So if you're panting, you can't hold a conversation while you're doing it, it means you're going a little bit too hard. Try to back off in the intensity a little bit. It's called zone 2 because you want to be in that zone 2 for your, target heart rate. So, think about in terms of intensity, if you like percentages or RPE. Let's say we have a 1 to 10 scale, 1 being really light, 10 being going all out, balls to the wall, high intensity. You want to, be anywhere between a 4 or a 5 max while you're doing this, okay? So I usually will recommend doing this, anywhere between, twice a week usually is a general sweet spot for most people. It's your foundation when it comes to your conditioning, so you can't really outgrow it though. So even though it's the most basic form of these 3 methods that we're going over today, it doesn't mean that you should neglect it entirely. If you're a more advanced athlete or a more advanced gym goer, you should be implementing in your routine consistently. It doesn't even need to be on the assault bike. You can go if you have a dog, go for a walk, or you like getting outside, go for a walk or a hike, listen to a podcast while you're going for a run outside or something. But the assault bike, I like it because it's easy on the joints, so it's approachable for a lot of people. So if you have pre-existing knee issues or hip issues or anything like that, it's not going to tax your joints at all. You're going to feel good. It's a concentric only tool or exercise, so the recovery is really fast too. I'll usually hop on here once or twice a week for about half an hour, listen to a podcast while I'm doing it. And then, it's just a good sort of tool to have in your gym. And the cardiac output is probably the most basic or foundational form of the conditioning methods you can do. The second one, take it up a notch, is a step up from the cardiac output. It's called tempo intervals. And a tempo interval is basically we're doing a little bit more work in a short period of time with maybe at about 70% intensity for anywhere between 10 to 12, maybe 15 seconds. And then we dial back the intensity back down to that zone 2 area, about 40 to 50% for about 45 to 60 seconds as an active sort of recovery. So it's not high intensity intervals where we're going really hard for a short period of time. It's a little bit kind of in between that cardiac output and high intensity intervals where we're going a little bit harder for a short period of time, but it's not max effort. And I will usually include this in my programs anywhere between once or twice a week, maybe, depending on the client or depending on where I'm at for my personal program. So basically what it looks like is if cardiac output is maybe more like a gradual pace here, I'm at about a 55 to 60 RPM here. If I want to do a tempo interval, I'll go up to about 70%. So I'll pedal a little bit faster here. RPM right now for me is inching up anywhere between 75 or so, and then I drop back down to that more gradual pace, okay? In terms of sets and reps, what I'll normally do for tempo intervals is I'll go anywhere between 15 to 20 sets or 10 to 20 sets total, depending on the program and depending on the client. And I'll usually, in terms of the time frames, the tempo, the interval itself, like I said, it's going to be anywhere between 10 to 12, maybe 15 seconds max. And then when I dial back down, I'm going to follow that for anywhere between 45 to 60 seconds. I'll usually progress it in a program by adding rounds and just adding more volume. So week 1, I might do 10 to 12 rounds, say 12 rounds. Week 2, I'll add a round, I'll do 13. Week 3, I'll do 14. Just keep it simple, add more volume, add more rounds. These are tempo intervals. The third method is explosive repeats. So that's basically like high intensity intervals. So we're gonna follow the same time structure and guidelines as the tempo intervals, but we're going at 100% effort with a complete rest. So whereas tempo intervals, we're at about 70% intensity for that interval period, that short period, and we're dialing back the intensity and doing active recovery. The explosive repeat, we're going 100% effort for that short period of time, and we're resting completely in between intervals for a full recovery so we can go all out for that interval. I'll kind of just show you an example. So if I'm here, a tempo interval might be a little bit more gradual like this, maybe 70% intensity. An explosive repeat, you're going all out as fast as you can, trying to drive that RPM up as high as you can on the assault bike or burn as many calories as fast as you can on the assault bike. Now, there's a couple of ways that you can gauge progress and measure progression in your program if you were to use this in your workouts. One way is to track the time, where you have the option of increasing the work time over week by week or decreasing the rest period week by week. The usual time structure that I'll follow for this is 10 on and 50 off. So I'll go 10 seconds high intensity, get that RPM up as high as you can, full rest of 50 seconds after that. You can increase the volume by like adding rounds following that same structure. Or if week 1, you start off with 10 seconds interval followed by 50-second rest. Next week, you can go up to maybe 11 or 12 seconds interval. Keep that rest period the same. Or you can drop the rest period slightly and go down to maybe more of a 45-second rest. I wouldn't go any lower than that in terms of the rest period, just because you are going to need that recovery in between sets. So manipulating the time structure and or adding rounds is one way to progress with the explosive repeats. The other way that I might do it, this is more of like with my one-on-one training clients, is I might set a standard. So we might set a standard on how high they can get that RPM up initially on that first interval. So see how hard they can go. So let's say, for example, if I do this interval and I get up to 100 RPM on my first round, I'll do that, interval, get up to the 100 RPM for about 10 seconds, maintain that. I'll fully rest for 50 to 60 seconds. I'll do the interval again, and I'll try to complete as many rounds as I can while maintaining 100 RPM for that interval. Once I'm not able to achieve, or my client isn't able to achieve that 100 RPM and that standard that you set at the beginning, then we cut the rounds. We'll track how many rounds we completed while maintaining that intensity. The next week we'll do the same workout, but we'll try to complete more total rounds, and that's just one way you can measure progression on a week-by-week basis using the explosive repeats. So those were 3 conditioning methods you could do. The assault bike, we got the cardiac output, which is like your foundation of fitness, right? Or your cardiovascular fitness. You want to be following that maybe twice a week, 30 to 40 minutes per session at your zone 2 heart rate. So remember, make sure that you are using that talk test. If you can't hold a conversation while you're doing it, you're going too hard, dial back a little bit. Should be getting a little bit of a sweat, but it shouldn't be, overly exhausting while you're doing it. You should feel better after the session, okay? The second method is your tempo intervals. So that's like the step up or progression from the cardiac output. You are doing, anywhere between a 10 to 12, maybe 15-second interval at about 70% intensity, followed by a 45 to 60-second active recovery at more about 40 to 50% intensity. Okay, so we're going a little bit faster and then dialing it back a little bit slower for that active recovery. The third method is the explosive repeats. That's when we're going all out as hard as we can for a short period of time, anywhere between 8 to 12 seconds, 100% effort, followed by a full recovery of about 50 to 60 seconds. I would follow that method. No more than once or twice per week is going to be sufficient for you, because you need to make sure that you're getting that recovery, since that is such an intense method. I hope this helped. If you have any questions, let me know down in the comments. Please like and subscribe. I'll see you guys soon.